For those of you who have been here before, you know this is our third location change in 4 months. So we hope you found us. We decided to graduate to Windows here after being in the closet for 6 months. We thought we'd throw a view in just for good measure. For anybody who's new, if you haven't talked to one of the members of the steering committee and you have questions or comments or whatever, please talk to one of us afterwards. We'd love to talk to you, and if you have any questions about membership, we would love to have you join, of course. As far as this location, I've only heard positive comments. Does anybody have any negative comments? No? We'd like to hear those too, obviously. We are meeting here next month, and tonight's program, I think, is very timely, especially with David Skondras' proposal for the Family Protection Act. You see the paper, it seems like every week, which has a lot to do with what we're talking about tonight, which is spousal rights for gay couples. And just so anybody, I don't think it's going to be a problem. They're videotaping this, our guests tonight, for their own personal use. I don't even think anybody's going to be in it, but if it is, it's going to be the back of your head. So if you have a problem with the back of your head being in kind of a video, the cameras are right here. I don't think anybody's going to be getting that. But just wanted to let everybody know. You might have seen on the video monitor over here a number of appearances these people have made on the Donahue Show, and Geraldo, and Good Day's Show. There was a cover story on The Advocate that featured our guest tonight, and also a big page-and-a-half article in the Boston Globe about a month and a half ago. We have 4 guests tonight, one unannounced, and she's a riot. Todd Barr Sawyer, formerly Todd Barr, from Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and he is employed right now by a major U.S. airline as a flight attendant, right? That's right. And Jonathan Barr Sawyer, formerly Jonathan Sawyer, who's also obviously a resident of Portsmouth, and he's employed as an interior designer. Right? Obviously, these people have joined their names together. That's why their name is Todd and Jonathan Barr Sawyer. And they were married in a ceremony last June at the Unitarian Universalist Church in Portsmouth. And about 150 guests were in attendance, and I believe that was on the video also, if you saw the wedding ceremony. As far as the sequence of events that's happened in the last year, I'll let them tell that story. It's pretty wild. What they're out to do is try and change the laws in this country to protect gay people, to allow same-sex marriages, to have the right to file a joint tax return, to protect survivorship, just obvious things that everybody else seems to get by benefit of marriage. They're also committed to educating as many people as possible out there that gay people are productive, creative, and respectable citizens who deserve all the rights that everybody else has. They've made a difference already. They've earned a lot of respect in their own community and a lot of support. And they're 2 obviously intelligent, successful people who love each other very much and are willing to take a stand. And we're real excited to have them here tonight. Along with Todd and Jonathan is Mary Bonato. And Mary is an attorney for GLAAD, which is the Gay and Lesbian Advocates and Defenders, which was founded here in Boston in 1978, and it's devoted to securing and protecting gay and lesbian civil rights throughout New England. And Mary is the staff attorney here in Boston, and she's been here for about a year. And her practice concentrates mostly on gay and lesbian civil rights in the areas of discrimination, family law, anti-violence, and military law. And one big focus of her work has been the Lesbian and Gay Civil Rights Act, which was passed here in Massachusetts in 1989. And our last guest that's unannounced is Shirley, Todd's mother? Todd's mother. Is it Todd's mother? Todd's mother is a riot. This woman is great. She's the mother everybody who came out to their mother and they didn't really like it too much. This is the one you always wanted to have. She's great, and she's gonna talk a little bit about her feelings on the whole matter. So first I'd like to welcome Mary Bonato to explain a little bit about the situation.
Thank you, Greater Boston Business Council, for having me here. I'm going to talk to you tonight. Actually, first, since I have a captive audience, I'm going to tell you just a bit more about GLAAD. GLAAD is a public interest law firm. There's one attorney who does completely HIV-related work, and I do everything else. So we're all busy, and you're welcome to call us anytime. Our services are free, and I also do a lot of troubleshooting with people on the phone. I'm always happy to have those kinds of productive conversations and exchange ideas. What I'm here to talk to you about tonight is something I get a whole lot of phone calls about. It is the employment issue of the 90s, this domestic partnership thing we keep hearing about. And I say it's an employment issue in part because after the gay and lesbian civil rights law passed, people called me up and they said, my mother lost her job, or, I've been laid off. Can I get on my partner's insurance? Okay, and people thought that since the gay and lesbian civil rights bill had passed, and since gay people were no longer supposed to be compensated differentially, they should just be able to sign on for spousal benefits. And I had to say to them, well, it's a great idea, and I'm really with you in principle. However, when the legislature passed the law, it included a notorious Section 19, which says, now I'll quote, nothing herein shall be construed to require employers to provide health benefits or other employee benefits to, quote, so-called homosexual spouses. Okay, end quote. Really insulting language, and the legislature has preempted this field, and what all this means really is that employers don't have to provide these kinds of benefits. However, nothing prevents them from doing it if they so choose to do so. Now, the reason this is such a big employment issue is because these big national benefit clearinghouses estimate that as much as 30 to 40% of your overall income comes in the form of these, so-called fringe benefits, retirement packages, health insurance, dental, bereavement leave, sick leave, whatever it happens to be. It can really add up to be quite significant. So what you're really talking about is an issue of equal pay for equal work. If I'm sitting in my little office at GLAD and, actually GLAD's not the greatest example of this, but if I'm sitting in my little office in my own law firm in Maine, and I'm, cranking out the same number of clients and the same number of phone calls and the same number of cases, there's no reason really that I should be getting paid less in the form of benefits than the person in the next office who's doing the same amount of work. And that's in fact what happens. That's the discriminatory effect of these laws. Now, this is not primarily, in my view, even an employment issue. This is really a family law issue, broadly conceived. This issue is about recognizing gay and lesbian families as families. That's what it all boils down to, and that's why there's so much emotional discomfort around it all. That's why employers don't like to talk about it, and even they're all bent out of shape about it. Is because it's really an issue of recognizing that gay people form partnerships and they live together and they do things like that. Now, unfortunately, there is this notion out there that what a family is a so-called traditional family of, mom and pop and kids and the dog. Well, what you should know, and I tell this to employers every single chance I get, what you should know is that according to U.S. Census data, okay, only 27% of families surveyed in the 1980 census, and this information was compiled in 1988, of 91.1 million families surveyed, only 27% fit the model of a man, woman, and kids. And then that number dropped to 7% when you were talking about the super traditional model of the man being out in the workforce and the woman being at home taking care of the kids. So we're not talking about the traditional family being an anachronism, but we are talking about it being only one of many varieties of family. And I also don't mean to suggest that the other, whatever it is, 73% of families are lesbian and gay. I don't think that's the case. I think I'd be stretching it a little bit. But there really is some serious diversity out there. Now, to give you a little bit of the national overview on this, okay, there are currently 17 municipalities and counties that have extended some kind of domestic partnership ordinance. Okay, and what this means usually is that at a minimum you have a chance to sign up your partner and say, we're family, we're a couple, we meet the criteria in your definition under your local law. And usually you have to sign a little form that says I'm over 18, we're not related in any way that would bar marriage in the state of whatever it is. We share the common necessities of life, we live together, etc. You sign that up, and symbolically it's important. It's important to individuals. It's also important in getting a message out to the wider world that, again, we exist and we exist in family forms. So like I said, there's 17 of these. Sometimes they also attach concrete benefits as well. There's some municipalities that will extend health, retirement benefits, the full range. And as I think was just mentioned, there's an ordinance pending here, the Family Protection Act, which is unique among all the ordinances that have been passed nationwide. And it's unique because it's not only a domestic partnership ordinance, but because it would extend protections to so-called extended families, which could be, for example, two married couples who set up house together. Okay, it's any group that wants to define itself really as a family and meets the other criteria in the ordinance. They have to look out for each other and so on and so forth. But it's a novel concept, and it recognizes, I think, Councilor Sconders recognizes wisely that this issue of family is really much broader than we're willing to acknowledge so far. Now also there are in fact private employers who have extended this kind of coverage. They're not incredibly numerous. I could really list them all up tonight, but I'm not going to do that. Some of the bigger ones are Levi Strauss, headquartered in San Francisco, the American Psychological Association, Ben & Jerry's Ice Cream. One of the big ones recently was Montefiore Hospital in New York City, which has 9,000 employees, just extended domestic partnership benefits for same-sex couples only. I'm going to talk a little bit about that later. There are also unions who are very hot on this issue. You should not underestimate unions on this. The National Education Association I'm working with right now, they have policies saying these benefits should be negotiated for in contracts, and they're trying to push it. They only have so much control over the locals. And the really encouraging thing for me as a lawyer is that even courts are catching on to this as an issue. And you've probably all heard, and if you haven't heard, I'll tell you right now, about this basically landmark case that came out of New York State in 1989. And it involved this really not very sexy rent control ordinance in New York City that said, if you have a rent control apartment and you're named on the lease and you die, the people who are allowed to stay in the apartment after you die are your family. And it's a gay male couple that had been together 10 years, and the man on the lease died, and his partner wanted to stay in the apartment. And went through the courts, and it got up to New York State's highest court, and the issue was whether or not the survivor was a family member under the New York City rent control law. And the court said yes, in a beautiful opinion, which I just have to read to you for just a minute because it's so rare to see this kind of thing. In talking about the definition of the term family, the court said, rather than rely on fictitious legal distinctions and ties of blood and marriage, a more realistic view of family includes two adult lifetime partners whose relationship is long-term and characterized by emotional and financial commitment and interdependence. New York State's highest court.
Right.
Not bad. Not bad at all. So anyway, there is even progress in the courts. Now I just want to lay out what some of the issues are that employers are uncomfortable about, and so on and so forth. One thing that happens when you raise this issue sometimes is that employers would say, listen, I really love to help you, but this isn't a sexual orientation issue for me. I don't have anything against gay people. The issue for me is that they're not married, okay? So for example, I employ Janie over here who's been with, this guy for 10 years, and I don't give her boyfriend benefits because they're not married. In the same way, I'm not going to give you benefits because you're not married. So what they say is it's really an issue of marital status discrimination, and what you should know is that in this state, in employment, it is legal to discriminate on the basis of marital status, okay? Which takes out your legal footing, okay? So you get nice to death on the issue, and they have this out on the marital status. And in fact, in the only reported domestic partnership case in the country, which came out of California, that's exactly the out the California court took. They said this is completely an issue of marital status, has nothing to do with sexual orientation. Now, another issue that often comes up with employers is how are we going to figure out what's a family? I mean, you're asking us to intrude in people's personal lives and so on and so forth. And frankly, there's a legitimate concern there. But the court in Braschi, in that New York opinion, laid out several factors that are very commonsensical for evaluating what's a family, and that's what you see appearing in these domestic partnership ordinances as well. You can sign a form that says we're emotionally committed to each other, we're financially interdependent. We have an interwoven social life, we live together, we've been together this many years, blah. That's simple, okay? It shouldn't have to be an administrative nightmare. Then, of course, in case you never thought of it, the biggest argument is cost. Well, I have a lot of things to say about cost. At this point, I want to tackle people on this cost issue, okay? Because first of all, you cannot put a price tag on fairness. This is the idealistic argument. But you can't put a price tag on fairness is what it boils down to, and it really is a fairness issue. And I also say you have to stop balancing the budget on the backs of lesbian and gay employees, which is currently what's happening. If employers were truly concerned about cost, they would confine benefits simply to the employee and not extend benefits to the employee's family. But since many employers don't do that, they are clearly recognizing only certain types of families as as persons they are going to sanction for benefits. So I think that dispels, to some degree, some of the cost arguments. There's many other things I can say about it as well. The other thing you come up with employers is they'll say, oh, what's going to happen? These men are going to sign up, they're going to sign up their roommates with AIDS, and it's going to bankrupt the company. Well, if in fact you have one of these forms that you sign and you say you're emotionally interdependent and financially this and that, I mean, you're basically making people jump through so many hoops that it's really inconceivable to me that there's going to be fraud. And I say that because normally, if administering benefits for a company and somebody says they're married, do you ask them for a marriage license? Do you ask them if they're financially and emotionally interdependent, interconnected, and so forth? Of course you don't, okay? So in this case, and usually what's at the end of these forms, and this is something I should have mentioned earlier, is, you know, you're signing something that contains a penalty of perjury, and you're also giving your employer a chance to proceed against you if in fact you committed fraud on forms. So the employers have a way of going back and doing something to you if in fact you have, you know, perpetrated fraud on them. Now, as a lawyer, I get a lot of calls about this. In fact, you know, one of the earliest calls I got when I started at GLAAD on this issue was from the bar's lawyers. So the question becomes, what do you do about this? And one thing that I've encouraged people to do is, number one, feel out your employer, see what their attitude is. And the Montefiore case in New York is a great example of this. Just to tell you very, very briefly what that's about. Montefiore Hospital, you know, an employee from Montefiore Hospital, a doctor, went and saw Bill Rubenstein at the ACLU and said, I think I should be getting benefits, blah, blah, blah. They marched over Montefiore and said, yeah, you're right, you should be getting benefits. And then it happened again. And then the third time, Montefiore said, we can't keep doing this piecemeal, all right? So they established a policy that extended benefits only to same-sex employees, not also to heterosexual employees, just same-sex employees, since they can't get married. Okay, and that's the 9,000 employees we're talking about. So there's sometimes there are employers who actually want to do this. So I encourage people always to try, because you may not get a no, you may get a yes, and how they're going to work it out. Another thing you can do is use existing laws to try to push the definition of one's family. I'll give you an example of that. We're writing an amicus brief in a case here in Massachusetts, an unemployment case that's about as sexy as the New York City rent control ordinance. But what it involves is actually a heterosexual couple who've been living together 13 years in Cambridge. And the man is a carpenter and felt like he would do better out in Western Mass, so he wanted to move back to Western Mass. The woman quit her job to follow him, all right? So that she wanted to apply for unemployment. Normally when you just quit your job, you know, for no apparently good reason, you can't collect unemployment. She wanted to say that she had compelling, necessitous reasons for quitting her job, because in the law, if you have compelling, necessitous reasons for quitting your job, it makes the quit involuntary and you can be followed by unemployment. So she went out to Western Mass, she quit her job, she applied for unemployment, she got it. Okay? Then the Department of Education and Training appealed. And they said she should not be getting these kinds of benefits. She's not married to this guy. This is only for married people. So they went in front of the judge, and significantly, this is being heard at in Northampton, okay? So they went in front of a fairly conservative judge in Northampton, and the lawyer for the Department of Education and Training said, Your Honor, if you extend benefits to this couple, lesbian and gay couples are going to want to have benefits. You can't extend these benefits. And the judge said, I'm in Northampton. I don't want to hear this. So, and in fact, in another nice little opinion from a judge, one-page opinion, the judge said, this benefit is not restricted to those who are married to each other, but is extended to those who have a strong and long-lasting relationship, such as that of petitioner and her partner. So the benefits were granted on appeal, and the department is appealing again, even though they missed the deadline for getting the money back. So they're just doing this on so-called physical, which is one of the affairs of the case. So anyway, use the laws that are out there. Push. Why not try? What have you got to lose? You lose, you've lost nothing. Okay? Another thing you can do, and this actually is very hot in the university context, is if you have, you know, manuals or policies or contracts, or whatever it is, prohibiting sexual orientation discrimination or both sexual orientation and marital status, try to use those to say, look, if you've done the hard work, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Lawyer, you've passed the policy, you know, we commend you for that. Now you just have to apply it. You have to apply it in the area of employee benefits. And the reason I say this is so hot in universities is because they have a harder time tolerating hypocrisy, I think, in the workplace. If they have these, well, I'd like to think so. You know, if they have these, you know, non-discrimination clauses clearly in their manuals and inviting students to come to apply there for that reason and so forth, they really are sort of caught in a bind. And this is the same thing that happens with the ROTC issue. So anyway, I've actually had great success with the university up in Maine, actually the whole University of Maine system. I've been working with a group of people who are extremely agitated about this issue, and they get more agitated all the time. If you all get along really well. And I also represent an individual woman who's been with her partner for 19 years. You know, they had a house together, they had a kid together, and they're even happy. I mean, they have everything that you would think you would want in life. And Anyway, and the university has just stonewalled them the whole way and said this is a marital status issue, the sexual orientation policies in the contract, blah, 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 kinds of reasons. But all along the way, even though we're losing at each step of the grievance, technically we are changing minds. And at this point, we've actually positioned ourselves to do exactly what we need to do. All the employees out there are unionized. And at this point, our very agitated people have been invited to be on bargaining councils for the next contract, which is exactly what you need in order to make the change happen in the place that's unionized. The other thing you could do, if you're interested, is try to make new laws. And that's exactly what Scondress's Family Protection Act is about. I've encouraged Todd and Jonathan to work on Portsmouth, and I understand plans are in progress. And then finally, the last thing I want to say is there's a lot of room for agitation on this issue. It needs to be talked about, and by talking about it, again, that's how minds are changed. And I think the more heat we generate, the more likely we think. Thanks very much.
We just want to have these people tell their story and explain a little bit about their situation, because it's pretty unbelievable. And then at the end, we want to have questions and answers if anybody has things they want to ask these people. So it's Todd and Jonathan and the mother. The mother.
Hello, everybody. This is quite an honor for us to be down here in Boston sharing our story with you. Basically, I don't have a bunch of notes like Mary had. I'll try to summarize what we've been up to in the last year. I want to start off by saying, first of all, we did not intend on doing what we're doing. I mean, when we first had the idea of getting married and having a ceremony together, we never once, if someone had told us we were going to end up on Donahue or Geraldo, I would have been like, you're crazy. And speaking to different groups. We both come from pretty well different backgrounds. My coming out process was very simple, very easy. In fact, my mother wanted to go dancing when she found out. So it's been quite encouraging for me to be who I am. And in that regard, I've been pretty much an activist for as long as I've been out, which is about 10 or 12 years now. And I used to organize functions at my high school, and we had speakers come in on gay issues and everything. So when Jonathan and I got together, we've been together for about 4 years now, and we decided after about 3 years to formalize our union in front of our family and friends. This wasn't something that was foreign to us. A lesbian couple of friends of ours had done the same thing about 5 years previous. So we originally went to the Unitarian Church in Portsmouth. We talked to the minister. He put us through the same hoops that he puts every other couple that's looking to be formalized in a union ceremony. Asked us many questions. He met with us on several occasions. We finally picked a date, sent out the invitations, and we had originally only decided on having about 20 or 30 friends. Just this nice small little gathering. When the word started getting out that we were having this ceremony, more and more of our friends were calling, and friends of friends were calling, and people that we didn't even know were calling, and they're like, can we come? You know. So it ended up being this big deal, and we didn't intend on it being a big deal. But because of the way I am, and
they were calling it the royal wedding.
because of the way that I am, enough out of you. Because of the way that I am, I couldn't just be satisfied with a ceremony. I had to push for spousal benefits, and I figured, well, we're getting married, why not? So I originally applied to my employer, one of the major airlines, and filed all the necessary paperwork. I wasn't quite sure how to go about it, and I made sure that on every form his name was spelt out. Everywhere there was a female, it was crossed out, and I put male. Every opportunity that I had to describe my relationship, I did. I never once tried to cover this up and put it through as Joan, or Jasmine, or anything like that, It was Jonathan and Todd from the beginning, and I allowed for plenty of time for any issues to come up, and I applied like 3 months in advance. We didn't hear anything for about 8 weeks, but then all of a sudden we got a notice that our benefits had been approved. And I was like, whoa, this was too easy, you know. I couldn't believe this. And we actually got our flight pass in the mail. I'm a flight attendant, and the spouse and dependent children of a flight attendant, as well as the parents, can fly for free, which meant a great deal to us because we had tried going on vacations before where I was a non-revenue passenger and he was revenue and getting bumped in different planes. And anyway, it's a long, horrible story, but you don't want to hear it. So we got these benefits, and at the time, the ceremony was to take place. We were preparing for a show house. Jonathan's an interior designer, and we were doing a show house up in York, Maine. And so that was taking a lot of our time. And so we planned to take about 4 or 5 days right after the ceremony, go out to the West Coast, spend some time with my family out there, and just have a nice little long weekend and come back and do the show house, and then maybe go on a longer extended honeymoon at a future date. Well, 2 days before the ceremony, we got a call saying that the flight pass was no longer valid. Don't try to use it. And I was like miffed at the whole thing. I was like, what are you talking about? You know, I was just absolutely, it was like, if you can just imagine, we were so elated from the beginning, and then to get this news, it was very disappointing. So I didn't know what to do. I was so upset. We really couldn't do anything right away because we were in the throes of organizing this big event and doing it on a shoestring budget. Anyway, I ended up looking around and contacting different gay groups and finding out what are the legal benefits, what are the protections, where do we go from here? You know, I wasn't just going to take no for an answer, as so many people, I guess, have in the past, which is one of the things I asked the company in the process. I said, has anybody else ever done this? And they said, yes. And I said, well, what happened? And they said, well, when we said no, that was the end of it. I said, well, that's not the end of it with me. So we ended up finding Mary. We were referred through various organizations. We ended up down in her office, and apparently she took a liking to us, or the case, or something, I don't know. And one thing led to another, and she started writing on our behalf to the company. And about 2 months later, in August, we realized, we found out through another process that Jonathan had been listed on my health insurance and dental insurance from June 23rd, the date of our ceremony, and we didn't realize it was in effect until August. At that time, a situation came up where Jonathan had to be admitted to a hospital for a short time, and I don't know if any of you have ever used any of your health insurance, but there's a lot of qualification and pre-certification, and there's all kinds of hoops you've got to go through in order to just be admitted. All the paperwork has to be in order, all the dots over the I's have to be there, and the T's have to be crossed, and the hospital that he stayed with ended up checking this out on a daily basis for like the first week, and then every other day for the second week. And everything was fine. They kept getting the approval for the next step, for the next procedure. And then, lo and behold, we get a letter in the mail in November saying that he's no longer going to be on my insurance. And he had been listed as a spouse. His name was spelled out. He was a family member. At this point, Mary has been extremely instrumental in keeping me calm. I'm like a go-getter, and she's helped me to like pool my resources and to channel my energies in an appropriate way and not just sound off and throw a temper tantrum. I did have a little bit of trouble containing myself, and I wrote to 30 different studios across the country. I put together a little press package, and I didn't tell Mary this when I did it, but I did it. And we started hearing back from people, and before you knew it, the company wasn't responding to us. They weren't responding to Mary's phone calls or letters. I was like, well, maybe they'll respond to a national audience. So we ended up going on the Geraldo show. That was the first person who contacted us, and it was quite an experience for two country bumpkins to be flown down to New York and limoed in Joan Rivers' limo. She was on vacation in Australia. So, But we ended up doing the show. It was a really interesting experience. It was the first time we had either of us had ever done anything like this. The only thing that took us by surprise was I don't know if any of you saw it, but there was a Christian writer, John Lofton, that was on the program with us, and none of us knew that he was going to be there. So it was kind of like, gotcha. So we learned a lot from the people that were on that show, and then we had met the gay couple in Washington, D.C. that were trying to put a lawsuit together with the District of Columbia for denying them the right to have a marriage license. We appeared on Good Day with them in Boston, and then we also did the Donahue show with them. For us, our experience is that we're trying to just educate as many people as we can to say, look, enough is enough. You know, this is the person that I've chosen to be in a relationship with. Let's recognize it. You know, this isn't going to go away. We're not going to just, you know, go back into the wall and like blend in with the woodwork. This is something that we're very dedicated about. We came out to our church. The hardest thing was, I think for us, was getting up in front of our church to announce that we were going to be on Geraldo. It was like, it was pretty funny. And I think we were more nervous about that because it was a group of people that we know and we live with and we have to see on a regular basis. And they stood up and cheered and applauded and went on for like 10 minutes. And we were like both practically weeping when it was all over. Just the support that we got from our community was just incredible. The local papers up there have done feature stories on us, and anything that we can do to just raise consciousness, to let people know that, you know, gay people don't have to be second-class citizens anymore. We encourage people to do whatever they can. If they don't feel comfortable getting up in front of people and talking, or if they don't feel comfortable coming out, if you can affect just one person, if every single person in this room could touch one person and change their mind, the world would change overnight practically. And one of my mentors, I've read a lot of things about Harvey Milk and seen his speeches and read them, and you know, if we can just get to that one person, it's all worth it. You know, I know when I was growing up, we had no role models. I think it's incredibly important that we get gay people in the media, to get gay people in the newsprint, to get gay people on television, to get programming to include gay and lesbian characters. We need to be seen, we need to be heard, and people need to know that we're here, we're loving, we're committed, we're honest, we're caring. Maybe not all of us, but it goes the same for heterosexuals, you know. Nobody is exempt from being a jerk. We decided that, you know, this thing kind of snowballed. We never really set out to do this, but we encourage anybody to stand up and speak for your rights, and you know, discuss it with your friends, discuss it with your family members, get them involved. Anybody who doesn't speak up for gay people is essentially speaking against them. And it's time, you know, the gay 90s are back, let's face it. We're coming into a new decade, and I think this is the decade of the family, and it's so important for all of us to get the dignity and the respect that we all deserve. I mean, there's no need to sit back and let people walk on you anymore. And I encourage any of you that own your own businesses, if you have employees and any of them are gay and they do have a committed relationship, if you can find a way to extend benefits to them, there's a start too. It may only be one couple or two couples or whatever, but just to show that you don't discriminate yourself, I think is a very important thing. I don't know, do you want to add to this?
Please. I lived in Boston in the early 80s. I was wild. I went back to New Hampshire to retire, lead this very quiet life, and it's turned around, gone a different way. You know, it's the total opposite of what I thought would happen. The other thing is, I'm really fortunate I've been accepted into Todd's family. Like, my family is accepting. They love me, and that's it. I'm out of sight, out of mind. But his family has embraced me. I'm really fortunate. The third thing is, we have had no problem. We've had only support from anyone we know, gay, straight, or otherwise, about our relationship and ourselves. And I would encourage anyone to just be yourself. And if you feel like having a ceremony, just do it, you know? Like, we have a lot of straight friends that want to see the video. They want to see what happened. They just think it's really neat, you know, that we did this.
They
So
didn't
that's it.
realize how emotional it was going to be either.
Well, now for the comic relief. I'm Cheryl, and I'm Todd's mom, and I'm very proud of these guys. I don't know just what I'm supposed to be here for, but my main focus right now is to get an organization called PFLAG rolling. It's rolling, but it's kind of gathering a lot of moss, you know. There's like 200 chapters around the world. And I decided to start one in the Seacoast area, and I was told, well, we have to go slowly, and we have to do this, and we have to do that. And I said, well, let's just do it. So the first meeting is May 7th, and we have about 150 people that are talking about coming. We've got the message out, and we're working on it. I really don't actually need to talk to you people. I'd like to talk to your parents. About you guys, I get along great with you fellas, and you gals, but I really got a bone to pick with your parents. The organization is basically set up like I call it a pity pot. It's for all these poor parents who just can't deal with the fact that children are gay. Well, this is what it's about, you know. He's my son. He's wonderful just the way he is. I don't want him any different. In fact, I was so relieved to find out that he was gay and didn't have someone pregnant. But I said, let's go out dancing. We went to Members Gay Club up there. But my focus is really to get your parents and your friends to get behind us, because very much like Todd, I believe that if your parents are not out there voting yes, they're voting no, and you're their kids and they're going to help us too. I want to get away from, PFLAG doesn't know it yet, but I'm here and I'm working on a different course change for this organization. You know, I believe if someone comes up and says my son is gay, I'm going to say, so what, now what are you going to do? You know, I mean, I want you out there, all those parents and friends, helping, standing up and helping us find human rights for everybody. It doesn't, you better believe it. Walking those parades and standing up and going to their senators and writing letters and doing all the things we have to do to make this a matter of human rights. It's not about gay rights, it's about human rights. You're all human beings, you're all Americans, you all deserve the same rights and votes and benefits that I get. Just because I lived with a man doesn't mean I should have different. You guys probably do too. So I don't see why we shouldn't all have the same rights and benefits. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
And for Mary,
Right before the last census, there was a lot of talk about trying to get as many gay couples as possible to identify themselves on the census so that we can show up at the count. Is there any preliminary counts on that? Or?
Nothing preliminary, and in fact, I recently inquired about when that information would be out. It will be out in the next several months, one of those generic and see you later kind of answers. So nothing yet. And in fact, I'm not sure that they're going to completely demarcate who's gay and who's not. More about when Mary comes home.
Are there comparable legal obligations that we have with married couples for duty or maintenance, alimony, what have you? Does that go both ways?
Absolutely not, and this is actually a really critical point. marriage is regulated by state law. And when you want to dissolve a marriage, you have to go through the state and have your marriage dissolved. And that's why you end up with divorces and alimony payments and a whole set of rights and responsibilities come with marriage that do not necessarily come with domestic partnership, for better or for worse. Some people feel good about that, some people don't. I'm not going to be in a position to take that away. But anyway, no, and in fact, under the Boston ordinance, let me see if I can explain this, since the language was so incredibly important, but what the gist of it is, let's say I'm a City of Boston employee and I'm getting benefits from my partner. And let's say she goes and she racks up some kind of huge medical obligation, okay, that is not covered by insurance. The question then becomes,
Trying to play Donahue here, what the hell? Yeah, I just figured that out.
okay. The question then becomes, what is your obligation, what is my obligation for those benefits and so on? And the way that the ordinance is supposed to have been drafted is that if my employer is extending health benefits to me for my partner, and those benefits cost my employer $20 a month, then I'm only going to be responsible for the aggregate of the benefit I've gotten from the employer. So let's say, for example, she's been on for 4 months, I received an aggregate of $80 of benefits for health for my lover through my employer. I'm responsible for $80 a month uninsured medical expenses. Now, I mean, I think there's a real compromise here, and I think in terms of how this plays to the world at large, it looks like gay people are trying to get rights without responsibilities. Sometimes it looks that way. It's also true that, you know, there's a lot of rights we don't have, and this domestic partnership stuff, in fact, is extremely limited in what it gives us. So should we be asking for the full set of responsibilities through one of these ordinances? Does that make any sense? Okay.
Is there, are you also pushing for legal marriage status for gay couples?
Well, well, I think we should all talk about that question, actually. I was hoping that Eric would come up. First of all, we're a 501c3, we don't lobby, because of our tax exempt status. But we're, you know, constantly confronted with this issue of marriage, because it would make a lot of problems go away. Now, I'm going to speak purely as a lawyer right now, and as somebody who's trying to make sure that gay and lesbian civil rights are protected and not pulled back, all right? The last time that people took a big gamble in the courts with gays was in 86 with Bowers versus Harvey, at which point the United States Supreme Court had an opportunity to rule on our privacy rights in the context of so-called consensual homosexual sodomy, all right? And at that point, the United States Supreme Court, granted not the Massachusetts High Court, but the United States Supreme Court went out of its way to close doors on gay people and to say, you don't have this argument, and you don't have that argument, and you don't have that argument. And lots of cases after that point, gay rights cases, folded up and went away because the Supreme Court said, you haven't got these theories to avail yourself of. So as a lawyer, when I think about filing a marriage challenge, I get kind of nervous because I think, what is, you know, let's say we file a marriage challenge and we allege certain constitutional theories. What is going to prevent the court in this state, which is already extremely self-conscious about having this gay rights bill, from saying, of course gay people can't get married, and they can't adopt either, and they shouldn't be foster parents. That's what our Constitution says. All right? What is to prevent them from doing it? So that's one angle I have. The other thing is, let's say miraculously, the Supreme Judicial Court in the state said, yep, our Constitution says gay people should have the right to get married, or whatever rationale they had. I suspect that overnight, the legislature would gavel a bill through 3 readings to say that this should be repealed and to make gay marriage unlawful, okay? Because it really, when you boil it down, is a matter of state law and of state legislative law, okay? So, from my perspective, you know, I wrestle with this question a lot about what to do about gay marriage. And part of why I talk about domestic partnership so much is because I'm trying to think about ways we can craft the definition of what's a family and get courts and legislators and the people who are making decisions accustomed to the idea that we're out there so that in 3 years or 9 months or whenever it is that there's a marriage challenge, it's not such a novel and bizarre idea to them. So that's where I'm on. You want to talk about that?
As far as marriage goes, I personally feel like there should be the option of gay marriage, just like there's marriage for heterosexual couples. I feel gay people should also have the same option to be legally married, as do I feel that gay people as well as heterosexual people should have the option of being in a domestic partnership and not have the same legal binds as a marriage defines them. And for 2 reasons. The biggest one is obviously for survivorship and protection and filing a joint tax return and all the things that go along with being in a married situation. Secondly, there are gay couples that have been together for long periods of times that end up, for whatever their reasons, not being. You want to jump in? Oh, okay. That end up not having their, it doesn't work out. And there should be some sort of protection for when couples like that dissolve their relationship. Right now, you can just walk out the door and that's the end of it. You know, and you can take everything with you and close the bank accounts and you're gone and there's no protection at all. As far as, you know, I personally feel it's going to happen before the end of the decade. I know Denmark, I think it's Denmark that has legalized gay unions in the last year or two. And Sweden is considering it, or I'm not sure what the actual laws are, but it is happening. You know, it's being talked about, and that's part of what we're doing. We're raising consciousness. We're just trying to educate people so that when the issue does finally come up into a court, be it 9 months, 3 years, 10 years, that it's not going to be like we've never talked about this before. It needs to get out into the open. It needs to be talked about so that when it finally does come up, it's not like this taboo thing. You know, it's kind of like old hat. You know, we already know about it. We've talked about it. Now let's do something about it. And I think that day's coming. It's just a matter of time. It's going to involve everyone, you know, everyone that's concerned about it to speak up on it.
Actually, there's one more thing I want to say about the gay marriage issue. Just because I am not particularly excited about filing a marriage challenge does not mean there's not a lot of room for activism on this issue. Because part of the way the legislators and the judges and so on are going to get it, that we want it and that we're mad about it, is through activism. And that is why, for example, I have no problem with Queer Nation like having, you know, marriages or whatever they are, and asking for marriage licenses and publicizing the fact that they were denied to get the message across that this is what we want. And I think these are the kinds of things, this is just one example, but I'm trying to say that activism, I think, is a really important part of this, and it's part of the educational process.
Could you say something about the status of common law marriages and alimony suits in light of what you said?
There's no common law marriage in Massachusetts, and in terms of palimony, there have in fact been no gay cases actually litigated up to the appellate courts in this state, but there have been some heterosexual unmarried cases that have wound their way up into the appellate courts. And there are various theories where if you have a lot of money and you can hire a lawyer and you have the emotional stamina to put up with years of litigation, you may actually at some point be able to, you know, come up with some kind of partnership theory or constructive trust theory on which to say I should have half of the house on West Indian Street. And it's, you know, it's not a process I would want to get involved in, and I don't practice in this area. It's an area I used to practice in, but you know, a little bit of free advice here. You know, I really think it is important for people to work out in advance while they're getting along, what their expectations are about division of property when they're not getting along, so that you can save yourselves a lot of money and a lot of heartache. Does that answer your question?
Yes, could you also say something about the phenomenon of prenuptial agreements and how that may apply in gay situations, or how maybe just a contract process applies?
Well, yeah, I mean, technically, I don't think there could be a prenuptial agreement since there's no nuptials on the way. But, yeah, you're raising exactly what I was just saying, which is this issue of sitting down in advance and working out some kind of contract. You can make a contract about how you want to divide property. And the one thing you have to be careful of is not to make sex the consideration for the contract. So you have to talk about it because of your services to each other and, you know, companionship and you're this and you're that, you know, and construct the contract that way. But none of these contracts, in fact, have been tested by the appellate courts. So, to my knowledge.
I have a question. Is there any thinking about a third state where lawyers would come and say, a single person, because as they age, they're not going to have a spouse who will cover the they're not going to have children. To me, the employer should give them the money.
Well, you are raising a great issue, okay? And let me just make sure I think you're raising the issue that I think is great. Let me just check. You're raising the issue of what happens when somebody's not in a couple. They're not in any kind of family, so there's not going to be any of this domestic partnership benefits. What happens to them? They get screwed, right? Is that the issue? Okay. Well, right, right. Yeah, I mean, this raises an even more fundamental issue that is made particularly potent in the context of looking at the collapse of the insurance industry around AIDS, and AIDS caps, and AIDS this and that, all kinds of ways to squeeze out of paying AIDS claims. I mean, what it all boils down to is why should your entitlement to health care be based on either A, your employment, or B, your status as being in a relationship with somebody else? I mean, is there some other right to health care or long-term care or whatever it may be? That is an issue that is, you know, a valid one to raise, and I think there's a lot of people who would like to trash the whole system and say domestic partnership is a waste of time because really we should be fighting for national health insurance. And I say, well, you know, we're not a utopia yet, so what are we going to do in the meantime? But I think it's a very valid point, and you're right that that class of people is excluded by all of this. And they're the people who really, there's no way for them to get even paid for employment. I'm sure that's true. And I'm sure people pass in and out of that category as well. Personally speaking.
How does the state of New Hampshire deal with your relationship? Do they deal with it?
Yeah, they deal with it all right. The state of New Hampshire is we probably picked the worst state in the union to live in. The laws, as I understand, yeah, legally, Portsmouth is a beautiful community. It's very democratic, very liberal, very open, and we love living there. But as the state itself is concerned, New Hampshire, I think, is one of the only states, or one of two states, that specifically denies adoption by gay people and foster care by gay people, which is pretty, and that just recently came down. Also, in July of 1987, I'd like to know when they did this and what bill they tacked it onto, but in July of 1987, that's when the wording came through the legislature that said that no man can marry another man and no woman can marry another woman. Up until July of 1987, the only relationships that were prohibited were polygamous, incestuous, and minor. But somehow that got put through. So, and New Hampshire is the largest legislative body in the country or the world, isn't it? It's like the smallest state and the largest legislative body. I can't figure that one out. But we do have our representative in the area, Bert Cohen. I know he would let me use his name. He's very, very much pro-gay, and he's very supportive of what we're doing, and he is willing to talk to us, which is one of the reasons why we've been very interested in getting together a domestic partnership ordinance for the city of Portsmouth. We have a lot of people talking about it, and this is the kind of thing we're educating people. We haven't actually lobbied or filed or done anything like that, but we're getting together on the issue, and we're raising consciousness, we're talking about it, we're putting it out in the paper as a possibility, and as more people hear about it and talk about it, I think eventually it might come to pass. We have people on the city council that are very pro-gay. One of them is actually in our church, and I mean the Unitarian Church. I don't mean our church. But, yeah, really. So, as far as New Hampshire goes, I can't